you all so much for being here. My name is Gene Luen Yang. I am a cartoonist. I'm also the moderator of this panel. The title of this panel is Healing Art. And what we want to talk about is something very positive. I feel like there's so much negativity out in the world today. We want you to leave this place feeling really good and possibly even healed yourself. We're going to talk about all the positive ways in which art has affected our lives. So I'm going to start by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Wayne Lowe to my immediate left.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Wayne Lowe. I'm on the description. It's put down as an ILM VFX art director. I worked at ILM back early 2000s, and then another stretch with Lucasfilm Animation for another stretch with the Clone Wars TV show, and a few little projects here and there in between. So, yeah.
All right.
Are we saying how art healed our lives?
No, not yet. That's the
I have a really good one.
Just an intro.
I have a good
Just
one.
an intro.
You do?
Yeah, you're gonna love it. Hi. I am Brianna Loewinsohn, and I'm a cartoonist. I live in Oakland, California, which is right by San Francisco. And I have a couple books out from Vienna Graphics. I hope you come say hi sometime during this con.
Hi, my name is Thien. Hi, everybody. My name is Thien Pham, and I'm a comic book artist as well. Also, besides being a comic book artist, I'm also a teacher and teach high school art with Brianna
I also
Loewinsohn.
do the same thing.
We also used to teach with Gene Yang before he got too famous and decided that kids weren't cool enough. He was going to go and get those Disney money. He actually looked a freshman in the eye and said, I'm gonna leave you for Disney money, right? Remember that?
This is the positive vibes you can expect.
Okay, hold on. We should also like all of us are either teachers or have been teachers, right? You should also say that.
Yeah, I'm the art teacher. in Hawaii.
What's cool?
Kona, Hawaii, at the University of the Nations in Kona, Hawaii.
Did Gene Yang leave that school too?
We haven't run the school since.
All right, I'm taking control again.
Gene, introduce yourself. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm a cartoonist. I write and draw comic books. Lately, I've been doing more writing than drawing. I did Superman Smashes the Klan for DC Comics. Thank you. I also did. I'm doing a series called The Books of Clash, which is based on a very popular mobile game called Clash of Clans. That's from First Second Books. And recently I did a rom-com called Lunar New Year Love Story.
That's up to 4 Eisners, you guys. 4 Eisners. That's crazy. 4 Eisners.
Okay, we're gonna get back on topic. That's what we're gonna do. So all of us, art has played like a really special place in our lives. And that's why nowadays as adults, we both make art and we also even teach art, right? All of us have taught art in some capacity. When did art first capture your soul? When did you realize that you wanted to be an artist? And what was it? Was it a piece of art or was it an experience? What made you decide you wanted to be an artist?
Well, as an immigrant kid coming to America, my parents would just leave us to go to work. And it's weird because some of us here were latchkey kids at 5 years old. I was a latchkey kid in kindergarten. Can you imagine if you have children out there that your kid coming home from kindergarten opens the door, makes himself a sandwich and just hangs out in the house? No, that's crazy. But we were latchkey kids since we were in kindergarten. The one thing we had was a TV. And so we loved cartoons. And as soon as I saw Robotech and Star Blazers and G.I. Joe, I was like, this is fantastic. This is for me. I didn't really think I wanted to be an artist until one day I saw this pamphlet that someone had given me. And it had some crazy paintings in it, and I was like, whoa, this art is really crazy. And I forgot what it was, and then realized later in adult life that those were watchtowers. You guys remember that? They were the Jehovah's Witnesses pamphlets, and they would have these crazy paintings of like the earth burning and like sheeps and stuff, and I was like, whoa, these paintings are crazy. How do they make it look so realistic? And I remember thinking, I want to be an artist and paint these. So if you guys run the Watchtower, if someone out there knows who is the editor of the Watchtower, I would like to paint a picture of the earth burning. So let them know. Let them know Thien Pham is on the market.
I was also a latchkey kid, starting from a very young age. I was not an immigrant child, but my parents were hippies. Have you heard of those? They were not really interested in parenting, so I would sort of roam the neighborhood. But one place that they did put effort was I was dropped off at a Saturday morning art class every Saturday as a kid. And it was just the only sense of calm and reliability for me. And so everything else was chaos in my childhood, but then I knew every Saturday morning I would have 1 hour of calm and peace, and like the teacher still works there. She's like the cutest old lady. Don't tell her I call her old. But that for me is where I first was like, this speaks to me, and this is where I feel like the most at peace and happy.
I was also a latchkey kid. I guess it worked out. Actually, my brother was 12 years old, and he had to take care of about 4 of us. We were 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old, all cousins, brothers. And as far as art goes, the first comic book we picked up was from 7-Eleven, and it was Magic, the miniseries.
Okay.
So Ileana Rasputin, whatever her name is. And we were amazed, and we had seen some X-Men, and this was an alternate universe where the X-Men actually met their demise. But that totally blew our minds, and we were stuck. After that, we were buying comic books as much as we could.
I was also a latchkey kid. I kind of feel like I kind of feel like if you grew up in the 80s,
Rich ever since you were a kid, you know.
If you grew up in the 80s and were not a latchkey kid, you're kind of weak. So I remember being a kid, being in 5th grade and drawing my very first comic book. It was with my best friend Jeremy. We had this character called the Hunter. It was kind of a rub-off of Robin Hood. So just like Robin Hood, he wore all green. Just like Robin Hood, he lived in the woods. Just like Robin Hood, he was on this team called the Merry Men. The only thing that was different was instead of fighting with a bow and arrow, he fought with like this discus of death that he would throw people's heads, right? And Jeremy and I, we drew these comics, and then we had his mom make photocopies, and then we sold them. And I remember a girl in our class named Cheryl Harris came up and talked to us because she wanted to buy a copy. And that's when I thought, man, art is magic. He's talking to me because of drawings that I did, you know?
If you ever got a chance to do like Robin Hood comics, would you just use the same story?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Why come up with something new when you're
already
We already have the discus of death.
All right. Well, now let's move on from origins and let's talk about us as like consumers of art or people who view art. Have you ever had an experience where you felt like art healed you, like brought some kind of wholeness in your life? I do think, this is my own personal theory, is that a lot of artists and writers were like broken people, and we gravitate towards art because we're looking for something inside of art. So have you ever had something where you felt like art brought wholeness to you? Anything.
Okay.
I mean, Tien's always going to start.
Yeah, I'm always going to start. If you don't tell me when I'm going to start. I think the earliest memory I remember of a time that art has really healed me is it's art that we probably don't want to talk about now, but it's music, right? Like in high school, I'm normally a happy person, but there was 1 year where I was very sad. And it was in high school, and I remember, and that was the year. I tell this story to our high school kids all the time, but like that was the year I was in AP art, and I forget sometimes that I was ever sad because I'm a typically very happy person. And then I remember when I was older, I would go back in and look at my AP art portfolio, and all of the art was just like these paintings of sad people sitting in corners. It was like so emo of me. I was just like, who was this guy? But I remember I was really sad, and then I listened to this band called Pearl Jam. And I really was like, this album, that 10 album really kind of healed me. You know, like it really, listening to that, I don't really understand what the singer was saying, like Eddie Rivera was saying, but I would make up the words in my head. And those words I made up in my head were amazing. And that really kind of saved me.
What were they? You gotta share.
Yeah, it's not REM.
There's a song called Alive, you know, and later on I found out that it has, like, it's about like, you know, like predators or whatever, but I thought the song was about, hey, you should be alive. And I was like, oh cool, this is a great song. So my words I think were better than his. But then like I get little healings all the time now through art. Like I tell people all the time that like my one thing that calms me down when I'm stressed out or sad or whatever is The Office. Like I watch The Office over and over and over again, and it's like this comforting thing for me. Like if when I drew Family Style in my comics, that was all drawn just by watching The Office over and over and over and over again. And so to this day, if I get stressed out about work or anything like that, one of the things I know that I'm going to do is I'm going to watch The Office. So that's one of those things that make a real healing art for me. I know you've been waiting for this. Tell us your story.
Well, I just wrote this book called Raised by Ghosts, and it's about high school in the 90s.
Who's the publisher?
Fantagraphics.
And where are they?
Where are they?
1721.
Oh, 1721. Thanks, Gene. That's a smart way to be. He's a businessman. So this book is called Raised by Ghosts, and it's mostly autobiographical, and it's about high school in the 90s, which is when I was in high school, and I was not a good student. My parents were hippies, so I started out at these crazy hippie schools where they were like, do whatever, man, but you like didn't learn anything. And then I went to public school, and they're like, you don't know anything. And then I had no one at home being like, maybe you need help. So school was not my favorite thing, but. I know, ironically, and I have to pretend that I believe in it. I'm like, you should do your homework, you guys. But what I found was drawing was like the place where I could succeed, and I could like get my thoughts out of my head, and I felt like I could be smart. Like that was like the first place where I felt like, oh, I feel like I'm smart at this, because everything else was pretty difficult for me. And I did a ton of art in high school, and then when I ended up like using that to get into like a pretty good college, and then I got really into school. And so I really credit art with sort of pulling me out of the mire of feeling very bad about myself in school. So thank you, art.
Very cool. So for myself, there was music. A song by Rich Mullins called Hold Me Jesus comes from the far end of the spectrum from the JWs, but still in the Christian vein. That was really touching, but since we're at Comic-Con, and Gene's here, there's two books back from the early 2000s. One was his, ABC, and it just gives you that home, that sense of belonging, that place that, you know, as back growing up in the 80s, you know, as a latchkey kid, as an Asian American, it's kind of, you know, where do you fit in? It wasn't a big deal. Everybody was who they were. But as you got a bit older, maybe more in high school and definitely college, you start to wonder like, well, you know, there's my cousins who speak Chinese really well, and I kind of do. I'm not really one of those guys, and I'm not really, you know, your run-of-the-mill, mainstream, say, if you want to say Caucasian American or something. So what am I? And ABC kind of encapsulates all that and gives you a home to attach to. You're like, hey, actually I'm one of those weird kids who's bit on his Transformer toys and stuff like that. Yeah, I read that one. That one too. But that one's more for my wife, who's Vietnamese. She relates to that one 1000%. And you won an Eisner for that, right?
Eisner winning Thien Pham, you guys.
Just one.
Well,
Wait, what was the other book? What was the other book? You said there were
The other book. The other book was after last year's con, I went back and reread Derek's.
Oh,
Everything, same difference.
Same difference.
Same
yeah.
difference.
Derek
Yes,
from Kim.
read that one, same difference.
Derek from Kim, yeah.
So he explores like he's still living in the same town, but he has to revisit some of his past relationships and some rough patches and some of the things he felt like he was the biggest heel over. But in basically, like I feel like he made a confession to his friend, and then everything was like released, and he just that weight and that burden was off his shoulders.
Yeah, it's a great book. Same Difference in Other Stories that came out maybe 15 years ago, and it's one of the few books to have won all 3 major comic book industry awards. It won an Eisner, it won a Harvey, and it won an Ignatz. If
Like
you
the
haven't checked it out,
like the EGOT.
yeah, the comics version of EGOT. That's right. It's the comics version of EGOT. If you haven't checked it out, it's been published by Top Shelf, but it's also been published by First Second. Both of those publishers should have it available.
Gene, when did art heal you?
Well, before I move on to my story, I wanted to ask Thien, why were you so sad for a year?
Oh, I don't know. It's gotta be a girl, right?
Was it a girl?
It's gotta be a girl.
Wait, was there a chapter in your book, Family Style?
It was,
About that?
no, it was
But there's
too.
a girl that
Yeah, there's
you
a
have a
girl.
crush on.
Yeah, there's a girl.
But you weren't sad in it, I guess.
We'll
Spoiler
talk about
alert.
that later. That's Family Style too. To
The sad year.
To the sad year.
Well, you know, when I think about my childhood and the kind of stuff I gravitated towards, I was very much a comic book geek, especially after 5th grade. And back in the 80s and 90s, most of the comics that were available in America were all superhero comics. So I think, you know, now, like analyzing it from an adult point of view, I think one of the things that drew me to superheroes was the secret identity, was this idea that you are living 2 different lives. I think I felt that as a Chinese American, like I often felt like I was torn between 2 worlds. You know, I spoke one language at home and another one at school. I had one name at home and another one at school. But I think even beyond that, I think superheroes, there's this idea that like, there's a potential inside you that nobody else can see, you know? And I think for a kid who feels like they're just trying to figure out their place in the world, they don't even know who they are yet, this promise of like a potential inside of you that nobody else can see, that idea can be just really powerful. And it can kind of give you like almost like a North Star to aim your life at, you know? So when you're reading Daredevil and everybody thinks he's just like this, you know, weak, blind man, but deep down you know he's like saving New York City again and again and again every night. Like that kind of makes you think, well, everybody thinks of me as like the skinny geek at school who has a hard time talking in class.
But deep down inside, I'm also a skinny geek.
Yeah, when are they going to find that magic powder inside you?
Who dresses up like a devil. Yeah, that's right. So I think there's something really powerful about that. Now, all of us have transitioned into not just like consuming art, but actually making art. Do you actively think about the healing power of art when you're making your art?
Say it
Can
again?
someone besides
We say it
Tim
again, I
start?
zoned out.
Do you actively think about? You're on a panel, by the way.
Which is so interesting.
Okay. So, do you ever think about the healing power of art when you're making your own art?
Yes, I feel like I'm just jumping in.
Yeah, do it.
You're welcome. Yeah, so a lot of my books are a little bit on the sad side. I'm still in Thien's sad year, but it's my whole life. I really make work that makes me feel something. And I think that so many feelings are universal, and you might get different things out of it, but if you can connect with people emotionally, I think that is transformative and helpful. And so I really like to create work that like hits on some sort of emotional level, and it's definitely really the intent of all my work.
Can you give a specific example?
So I wrote this book called Ephemera a couple years ago, and it's a memoir, and it's about my mom, who's no longer here and who has mental illnesses, and I really wanted to write about her and what it was like to be a child in the house with her, but every time I wrote it, I felt like I couldn't draw her, it like made me sick. And then I realized like I can draw it however I want because there are no rules in this comic. So I made it look totally different from how our life was. And that allowed me to like tell a very honest story about what it felt like. And I think that because it was sort of set in this magical dreamland, like other people have told me like, oh, that allowed me to kind of like see myself in it because it was sort of this like anonymous place that wouldn't really exist, that it just sort of looks like a vast sort of like foresty place with a house on it. It just doesn't really look like anything. I thought that was like that was really neat to hear that like other people, even though it didn't maybe look like that, but they were like, I could identify with that because it was this sort of dreamy place.
I don't know that it's articulated in my mind that I'm after healing or something like that, but it's more like this rumbling in your stomach, just like, whoa. There's something there that needs to get out, and if you can get it out, then you'll feel better. And if that thing in your gut that's troubling you, you know, say as an example, it would be, I don't feel like I fit in as a Chinese American, or whatever struggles that Brianna's facing, because she was a latchkey kid. If that gets out and somebody else can relate to that, but then I got it out and I feel better about it, then they'll probably feel better about it as well. They'll be able to have taken in that food poisoning or whatever that's in their gut, vomited it out, and felt better for it. I mean, I guess the story's not always that, you know, not that bad, not that gut wrenching, but that kind of thing.
When I had never thought about comics or as healing, myself especially. But I wrote Family Style, and it's about my family's immigration from Vietnam to America. And I just thought, I for a long time, I like really felt like I needed to get it out. I wanted to tell this story for a long time. I remember back in 2007, Gene is the one that actually gave me this idea because we were teaching, and I told him like kind of the gist about the story of coming to America, and he was like, I love this I do this imitation all the time, so I'm gonna do it. This is what Gene sounds like. He was like, dude, you gotta do that story. It's the only thing interesting about you. And that was harsh, but it's true. It is the only thing interesting about me. But I was never able to do it, you know, and I couldn't actually do it until now when I actually sat down and talked to my mom. And she told me about this journey, and talking to her about it, and she had never told me before, and I was like 48 at the time, and she's like older, and she was telling me this, and it was so like I was so moved by it, like my own story, you know, my own family story, that I was like, I really have to get this out. And even when I was drawing it, I just thought that it was just a thing that I wanted to get out. And then one day I had a book signing, a book talk, and this person came up and said, hi, I don't really know you, but the only reason she came to the book talk was because her name was also Thien Pham, which was really interesting. And she's like, but I am, she's a counselor, a therapist for, specifically for Vietnamese people that came over on the boat. And she's like, I help people with their trauma. And then I, like, with a straight face said, well, thank God I don't have any trauma. And then she looked at me and said, have you read your book? And I was like, oh. And I never thought about it like that. But I will say there's one thing that's kind of interesting, is that this chapter, the first chapter of my book is pretty harrowing. It's about pirates on a boat and stuff like that. And people ask me all the time the way I portrayed it, why I portray it that way. And I have to tell them it's because that's really from my nightmares. Like, it's from when I dream about it or when I have nightmares about it. It looks exactly like how I depicted in the beginning. So all my life I've had this kind of recurring nightmare once in a while about this particular thing. But then I could tell you that I don't have them anymore, that nightmare. So I don't know what that is or what it is, but maybe it is like what Wayne said. I had vomited it out, but it doesn't, I don't get it anymore.
But you're saying after you finish the book, you stop having the nightmare?
Now he's just sad in the corner.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I think for American-born Chinese, you know, when I was working on that, I was working in mini comics, which is just where you draw a comic and then you Xerox it, and then you just sell it by hand. And at the end of the day, if you sell like 12 of them, you're doing really well. I did it. At that point, like, you're not thinking about like money or readership or anything. You're just doing art for the sake of art. And I really think that the impetus behind that project was I wanted to take all this stuff that had kind of bothered me since I was a little kid and put it on paper. It almost felt like an exorcism, right? Like I was taking things that felt really big in my head. When you put it on, when you draw it on paper and it's like small, you know, it's small enough to fit on a page, it makes it feel much more manageable. And I think I had a similar thing where after finishing that project, stuff that felt emotionally charged to me no longer felt emotionally charged. You know, and maybe that was part of the healing process.
Yeah, I think because you can, like, when you draw something or make art about it, it's like you're taking the reins, kind of. So you're taking ownership and you're presenting it in the way that is true for you. And I think that for me is what's like so healing about it, where it's just like, this might not be how someone else experienced this is just how this felt to me, and that lets you like see it in this whole new way, like literally when it's comics.
Yeah. It like forces you to process it, right, when you're making art about it. Another experience I had was with Superman Smashes the Klan. I think you know, that was an adaptation. So Superman Smashes the Klan is a graphic novel that I did. It came out in 2020. I did it with Gurihiru. They're these amazing artists from Japan. And we adapted a storyline from the 1940s Superman radio show where he took on like this group of robed and hooded racists. So I was working on that at a time when things felt really fraught in America. I mean, not that they don't feel fraught now, they probably do too, but they felt really fraught in America. And there's something about writing Superman, because like Superman is a fundamentally hopeful character. So to write him properly, you have to be hopeful no matter what you're writing about. Otherwise, the story's not right? So I think walking through like some of the darkest parts of American history, but having to do it through Superman felt healing to me as well. It was almost like it was forcing the issue that there's always hope, no matter how dark things seem, you know. So the other question I wanted to ask you all is, do you feel like when you're working on a project that you're ever moving against healing? Like, does art ever hurt as you're working on it?
What?
Wayne, you go.
Someone I know. No, actually it is someone I know. I couldn't think of it immediately for myself, but the story of this one art student that we had. She was super talented. You could say she was the most experienced, most talented in the class. And she was drawing. She was drawing away. She would finish all her homework. It'd be amazing. She'd do extra assignments. And we came to an assignment kind of like this, where it was a reflective assignment. I work for a Christian college, so the assignment was Jesus saved me from blank, 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 blank. And so we went and explored that. She went to draw. Everybody went to draw. They started, they had their trouble and stuff like that. She had been so productive the whole time. As soon as she got that assignment, nothing. She just stopped in her chair. Nothing for like 2-3 days. Absolutely nothing. And then we ended up talking with her a little bit, exploring things with her. We prayed with her. We got some like little clues and insights, and asked her these key questions. And then her story started to come out that she had tried to go to art school in Korea, but had been denied because her artwork didn't fit that particular style. And so the whole thing is that she had been stopped up from doing any artwork for years. So when she finally came to our school, that was a huge step. But when she had to come up against that particular phrase in this assignment, she couldn't do anything. And finally it came down to this question: was it the people who denied her? Was it her not being good enough? Was it God didn't want her to be an artist? All these different things. These questions came up. Those were the blockers for her to go further. And we prayed with her, and she basically denied each of these one by one and said, it wasn't God who didn't want me an artist. He made me this way, and I'm going to do it. It wasn't these people who blocked my path because I am still an artist, and whatever they said is invalid, and so on and so on. So we had to, go through this list of lies that had banked themselves in her head. And as soon as we kind of went through all that and prayed through that, like the next day, she was all over the place. She was just as prolific as before, but every single style, cartoony, very graphic, very watercolory and loose, to like very rendered, to black and white, to like graphite pencils. She just started exploded, and you could see that capper just pop out.
When I was working on Family Style, there was this one chapter that I didn't want to draw, and I was like, I'm not going to draw this chapter. And my publisher was like, you need a chapter of you in high school. And I was like, I don't want to do this chapter. And they're like, well, we need it, so you have to draw. So I drew the chapter, and the reason I didn't want to draw this chapter was because when I was working on Family Style, one of the great things I loved about Family Style was that there was no bad guys, right? Like, I was awesome in this book.
Pirates.
My parents came out awesome in this book. We were all just awesome people making it. And then, I don't know about you guys, but in high school, I was kind of a dick, right? Like, I think, like a lot of kids, you go to high school and you look back at your high school life, you're like, ugh, who was that guy? And I think a lot of it was just that I had, one of the things that I'm very shameful of is that when I got to high school, I kind of just rejected my Vietnamese and Asian heritage. And I think it's something that happens to a lot of immigrants. And I talk to a lot of people, and they kind of tell me the same thing, is that like, you come to America, or you first come, and then everyone is like, you are not American enough. You gotta be more American, more American. And then you become American, you're like, and then you go to school, and then people are like, oh, you're not Vietnamese enough now. And for me, I just kind of rejected that whole Vietnamese side, and I remember like kind of making fun of other Vietnamese or other Asian people that were more Asian than me, and I was just like, kind of just like this person that's like, I'm American now. So and there's a scene in my book, I'm just gonna spoil it for you guys, that I didn't think anything of when I drew it. And it was when my mom packed me this amazing bánh cuốn from Vietnamese bánh cuốn. And my friends were like, hey, do you want to grab burgers? And even though I know that my mom's bánh cuốn is amazing, and she spent all this time making it for me, I threw it away. And I went and got burgers for my friends. And whenever I do talks at schools, every time I do, for every different age group, they ask me different questions. But when I do my talks for older people, they always talk about that scene. They always ask me about the time that I threw away my mom's food to get like burgers for my friends, because a lot of you guys, and I know some of you guys out here are like, oh yeah, I did that, and it's a very shameful feeling. So when I drew it, I was like, oh man, this Thien Pham is not good, and I didn't want at the time for people to think that, oh, I wanted everyone to think I was amazing. And so there was a time where like someone, and it was painful to look back at how terrible you were at some point, because sometimes you think about it and you're like, have I even gotten any better, than high school Thien, so that was a really painful chapter to write or draw, but I'm really happy I did it, because now I think that chapter might be my favorite chapter in the entire book, when I read it, I'm like, oh, because it's a memory that's all mine. Like a lot of the books are memories aided by my parents' stories, but that memory, the high school memory, is all mine, and all that pain, all the joy, all that stuff is all me. And so I think it's become my favorite chapter. But while I was working on it, it was super painful.
Well, I think that moment in the book lets us all be okay with being jerks at times, because if you are all awesome through the whole book, which you are mostly awesome, but it's like, I've been crappy. Everyone has done something that they're like, ooh, I don't love remembering this, and that really lets you be okay with that. Not those people, they were all perfect. So I think that's really cool. So I was thinking about, I never really thought about this because I always think of it more in terms of this, like, how can I use this tool to feel better? And all the comics I did, I've done comics for like 20 years, they were all mini comics, and they were all fiction books, totally fiction. And then life changed, I had kids, my parents are no longer here, and I'm not in touch with anyone from my family, or they're dead. So then I started making auto-bio works, and I was able to like make these books, and they're published, and it's such a great life, and it's so joyful for me to make comics and share them with people, but it's also a double-edged sword because I can't share that with my family. So I wouldn't have the books without them, but I also couldn't make them while they were still alive because they were so very difficult emotionally. It wasn't a safe space to like make the comic, so I couldn't have done either one without the other. But it is still sometimes sad that I can't share this book with like my mom or pops, but they also would have been bummed out if they saw it. I don't know, it's just, it's sort of like, it's such a weird thing for me.
But like your mini comics, even though they were fictional, I know because you told me that they were all pretty much about relationships.
Yeah.
Bad relationships that you've had.
Yeah.
Like when you were doing them, was it sad to kind of relive moments in your bad relationship, or was it cathartic, or did it make you feel better in a way? Like when you were drawing it, like the actual drawing of it, like was it hard to do something?
I was raised in a very like stiff upper lip, don't complain house, and so I think comics were a place where I could take like a bunch of different relationships or the parts that didn't feel good and put them into one book. So there's no book, most of the books are like not, oh, this is this specific person and this is this person. It's sort of like taking all of those feelings that I didn't know how to like feel and like putting them into the comic book so that I could see them, kind of like what you were saying earlier, Gene. And what Raised by Ghosts is about. It's like, how can you take these feelings and like make it something that you can handle, kind of. So I think with a lot of my stuff, I don't know, someone said that once, they were like, is it so cathartic to make this work? And I was like, it really is. And I like had not considered that would be helpful.
I personally have found when I'm like pushing up against resistance while I'm working on a book, that often it's because I'm like lying to myself about something, and if I can figure out what I'm lying to myself about, sometimes like that will crack and I'll be able to get all the way through to the end that I'm looking for. Well, I think we only have about 10 minutes left, is that right? So are there any questions that we can answer for you before we end? Oh, yes.
I wanted to ask about using art to reclaim things that maybe were hurtful, and I'm thinking particularly about American-born Chinese and these like very like offensive stereotype kind of images, but the way that they get reclaimed and reshaped through that book. But I would love to hear from everyone, like, how do you see your art reclaiming things that were hurtful or harmful in some way?
Well, for American-born Chinese, like I said, like putting that character down, that character was kind of an embodiment of all the stuff that had haunted me since I was a kid. I'm putting him down on a page, making him, smaller than the page, and then having a scene where he loses his head. All of that just felt very healing to me, and I guess I guess one way to think about it is before that, I felt like these were images that were outside of my control, and by drawing them, they became images that were in my control, that I could do what I want with them.
For me, like, the way I drew family style was, I did it on Instagram, and I did a page a day, and I don't write. So I basically just do pages, and then let those pages inform what happens next. So I never know when I'm sitting down to draw my comic what's going to happen. And unbeknownst to me, that chapter I was telling you about high school, it turned out the end, that chapter was about accepting being American and Vietnamese. And it is something that even as an adult, I really had a hard time with. And after finishing that, I was like, yeah, I can be American and Vietnamese at the same time. And I can pick and choose, when, and I can pick and choose what elements and stuff like that. And I never really thought about it until I told myself that was okay. So that really helped a lot in my life. And part of that is now, and this is maybe a benefit of doing the story, but because I constantly have to talk to my parents about the book and then ask them questions about our history, my relationship with my parents is so much better now. I've always had a pretty good relationship with my parents, but we never communicated very well. And I guess my tip for you guys is if you have problems relating to your parents, write a book about how awesome they are, and they will finally love you.
Just like taking the hard things and turning it into our least painful things, and how does that feel?
I'm thinking of a story that is, back burner, but I shared it with these guys a couple years ago about Taiwan, the forgotten ally of China, of America. So Taiwan is the Republic of China, the non-communist version of China, the leftovers of it. And so my grandfather went through and he fought 12 years of war, 8 years with the Japanese, 4 years with the communists, and then he went into this, deep sickness. And then he got better, but he acted sick. His mind was still PTSD or something. And the story is about him coming out of that, and he was a naval engineer, so he designed the targeting instruments and the navigation equipment for these destroyers that were gifted by the United States. They're gifted because I guess Eisenhower decided that the US needed to draw the line concerning the communists. But when he gave it to them, when the Navy gave it to the Taiwanese Navy, they stripped all that equipment out. So navigation equipment was gone, targeting instruments were gone. And to my parents and all the Chinese, it was the biggest slap in the face in the world. What kind of gift are you giving people? Generations later, on the flip side, I feel like there was a practical and an uplifting kind of thing. Like I imagine it in the best scenario that they knew what the engineers could do. They knew what the Navy could do. The Navy, like my grandfather, who was sick still in his head, had to do it. He had to see it. He had to see what was inside him come out before he could be better again. And the nation had to see that. The Navy had to see that. This little tiny island that used to be a massive continental country had to see that. So that's something that I see my aunts and uncles in Taiwan kind of struggling with, with these missiles flying over Taiwan and stuff like that. And so I guess that's maybe one of the tension points that squeezes that story to the front.
I think this is a really interesting question, and the first part of my answer is a bummer, but then it's gonna end hopeful. Okay.
Let's do it.
So I really like to make sad comics, but I really did have like a very crazy childhood, and so Ephemera, I cut out everything really that was like, or not everything, but like a lot of things that were specifics and real, like drug use and poverty and all of this stuff. I was like, that's not what I'm trying to talk about. I just want to talk about what it felt like. So I had to cut out, and so when I finished the book, or I have pages where those things are in it, where you see this stuff. I was like, that just doesn't fit with the book I'm making. It just didn't make sense with the story. And with that book, and with every book, I really want to be like focused on this is the story I'm telling. So at first I was sort of sad that I was like, well, I want to tell a memoir, but I couldn't put all this stuff in there. And then I did the second memoir, which is Raised by Ghosts, which has like tons of details of what our houses looked like. And I went the opposite direction, where it's like, these are the actual clothes I wore and what we had in the house. But I still, it was like, this isn't gonna fit into a YA book, because it was for young adults. It's like, I can't put all that in there, that's too crazy. So I still had all this stuff. But what I think is cool, and I might never talk about some of it in my books, is that it actually like has allowed me to tell all these different stories. So I'm like starting this new story now, and it's like, even though they're all memoirs, they can be totally different stories. And like, that is like a neat way to take these sort of like painful things, is really just look at them through very specific different lenses. And then you understand them differently too. So it's like, what I got for me out of Ephemera is totally different from what I got out of Raised by Ghosts. And whatever the next, I haven't come up with a title yet for this next book. So that is how I've sort of like taken painful things and tried to, and it actually has ended up really like, really great for storytelling, is you just can do it in all these different ways. And yeah. So.
Any other questions? I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm a teacher too, and I'm not trying to ask a time management question. I'm kind of blown away that you guys are all teachers, so I'm kind of wondering the logistics of how you keep producing your art while you're teaching.
I can tell you.
Yeah.
It's called Procreate. I don't know if you guys, and for a long time it was so hard to go home, sit in my studio, whip out that paper and pencil and ink and all that stuff, and draw a comic. And then I discovered the iPad, and it just makes things a lot faster.
Yeah.
And it allows us to draw. Me and Brianna both use it, and when we were, the other thing that was amazing, and I don't want to say amazing because a lot of people will be sad when I say this, is the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, me and Brianna were both quarantined, and basically we taught Zoom classes, and we would teach, and then we'd have all this extra time because kids would turn off their cameras and they're working on their homework assignment, and we would just be like, what are we gonna do now? So me and Brianna would sit in school with our Zoom thing, and we would just draw our comics on our iPad, and that got us to finish our book. Like, me and Brianna literally drew both our graphic novels together, finished together, like at the same exact time, and that got us into a workflow that kind of continues to this day, even though we don't teach over Zoom anymore. So that really got us into that workflow. But I would highly, if you are having if you want to do a graphic novel but it's hard to find time, I would highly recommend investing in an iPad, a program like Procreate or Adobe Fresco or something like that. Draw on your couch. Draw when your kids are fighting. Draw when they have a test.
I think that was the big thing. I have two kids also, and teach full-time high school. It's a lot, but giving myself I have 10 minutes right now. Why can't something done in 10 minutes? And it doesn't feel like you can, but if you add all those 10 minutes up, you get like a bunch of pages done. The other thing is that we teach art, so it's like we give the students an assignment and then we work while they work, which actually the students really love. So that is like a privilege of being an art teacher. I know English teachers can't do that. They work a lot harder than us.
Me and Gene did a comic together while we were both teaching back in the day. It's called Level Up. It's an amazing comic. Oh, we gotta go. Okay. Well, it's great talking to you guys.
Before we end, So Tin and I are going to be at the second booth at 5 o'clock in half an hour. That's 2800 to sign. And then Brianna's books are available at the Fantagraphics booth, which
Yeah, I'll
is...
just go over there right now. I'll
Which
just be
is-
over there at 1721, and I'm gonna hang out there.
Yeah, 1721. So at 5 o'clock, she'll be at 1721, and we'll be at 2800.
Yes. And I will sign any of Gene's books, and he'll sign any of my books for you guys.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Let's take a photo.